Hello, my name's Susan. I'm one of the trustees of the Stoke-on-Trent Foodbank. We've produced this video to introduce the COVID risk assessment and procedure that we've sent out to all of you. The idea of the video is to just highlight some of the key points within the risk assessment, but you do still need to do the whole risk assessment. It includes measures to be followed by food bank staff, volunteers, people with a voucher and other visitors, so it is a really important document to complete. As a team of trustees, we take our responsibility really seriously. And as you know, in England, Scotland and Wales, not observing social distancing in workplace or equivalent can be subject to law enforcement. So it's really important that we make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure that we are COVID secure. In order to do this, we need to do the risk assessment that provides evidence that we've looked at each section and that we've agreed that that is the safe way to complete our operation, to run our distribution centres. We complete the risk assessment by using a traffic light system. So what we're doing is checking the severity of the risk of respiratory droplets, coughing and sneezing, and contact with contaminated surfaces, because they are the main ways of transmitting the COVID-19. So that's the thing to remember all the way through: respiratory droplets, contact with contaminated surfaces. We use a traffic light system to help to work out what the risk level is. If you come up with white, not applicable, then we're okay. We're okay to do that. Green is an acceptable risk. Amber, which is slightly more risk, but still permissible, provided we're following the measures. But if you come up with red, that's an unacceptable risk. So the idea is to get all your risks either green, which is the best, or amber. Corinne and the rest of the team of management have looked really closely at what they can do to support you in maintaining COVID security. So as a team, Corinne has carried out a risk assessment listing all the processes necessary to run the food bank. We've identified the risk assessment processes, which usually involve more than one person in a restricted place. We've also asked referral agencies to ensure as few people as possible attend from households and that drivers wait in the cars. Also, people that shouldn't be in the food bank, media, local councillors, excessive visitors, we should be not allowing those to come into the food bank, because we're trying to reduce the amount of people within the food bank, reducing, as I keep saying, reducing the COVID risk. As part of the commitment to maintain safety for the volunteers, we've produced, with the help of a risk assessment agency, we've produced a risk assessment that will allow you and your volunteers to do a risk assessment on yourself to see if you're safe within the environment you're volunteering in. It's really important that we keep people safe. In order to do the risk assessment, if you just read it through, but the main things to remember are that if you come up in category A, you score between 1 and 6, you're fine to continue volunteering safely, maintaining social distance within the distribution centre. If your score comes between 7 and 8, and often it's something to do with possibly your age, your ethnicity, your health, or problems that you've had in the past with your health. If it comes out between 7 and 8, you're still okay to volunteer, but you shouldn't really be in public environments. You should be avoiding direct contact with groups of people outside of your own support bubble. Avoid direct contact with food bank guests where possible. At the moment in England, we're allowed to meet up with 6 people outside of our bubble. So 6 different people from different households. Any more than 6, you shouldn't be in that environment. If your score is 9 plus, then you shouldn't at all be volunteering within the distribution centre. We really value volunteers though. We don't want to say, oh, you've got a 9, you can't volunteer for Food Bank. But speak to us, speak to Corinne, speak to Faith, and we'll work out a way that you can volunteer safely. But we must be really, really careful that no one volunteers in an unsafe environment for themselves. Once you've done your risk assessment, your personal risk assessment, and you are okay to volunteer, it is important to remember some key points. If you are unwell, you're experiencing any symptoms, or you've been in contact with anyone that has got COVID symptoms, please don't attend the distribution centre. Don't think, oh, they're going to be desperate without me. Please do not come if you've got any symptoms. Where at all possible, it would be better if the teams are fixed teams to provide a little bit of security for your sessions. So say you've got 12 volunteers and you run on 6 in a session, because 6 is the maximum. Have half of your volunteers one week, the other half the next week, and keep to those fixed teams. Form your own support bubble, because that way, if one member of one bubble can't come and has potentially passed on the infection to others, you won't have to close because your other support bubble can continue. Don't forget face coverings. It's really important. All people really now should wear face coverings unless there's a medical reason, a really good reason, which the government have set out. So use government guidelines for your face coverings, but we do encourage everyone, where possible, to wear face coverings while they're in the distribution centre. Also, avoid facing one another directly for any length of time. Obviously, sometimes you will need to be facing one another, but risk assess that activity and minimise the amount of facing. Try to come in newly washed clothes. That's important from a transmission of COVID again. And also, really, really, really important, wash your hands regularly. Use hand sanitizer regularly. If you prefer, you can wear gloves, but that does not take place of regular hand sanitising, because you can be touching things with your gloves and still transmitting. So washing your hands, hand sanitising, social distancing, keep at least 1 metre apart, English rules. Try to keep 2 metres apart because it is much more safe. And just keep yourselves safe. Prior to opening your centre, you need to think about what your volunteers are going to be doing. There are key roles that need to be maintained in order to keep the centre safe. You need to be cleaning and disinfecting all surfaces, door handles, screens, and that needs to be before, during and after each session. We also need to think about the food cupboard management. How are you going to be making up your parcels? Are you being able to keep your volunteers at least a metre apart, not facing one another? Things like that. So think through that process. When you're receiving the vouchers or the e-number from your guests, you need to be particularly careful because, again, of COVID transmission. We need to be not handling paper from other people. So when a guest comes with a red voucher, have Polly Pockets ready. Get them to drop the red voucher into the Polly Pocket. Then you can read the details. When they come with an e-number, have your slip ready. You have e-voucher slips in your centres. Get them to read the number out to you and you write it down. Minimise the amount of contact with anything that someone else has handled. You also need a computer operator, someone to check the voucher, enter the details, and also you need someone to be greeting the guests, managing the queue, giving the food parcel. The maximum amount of volunteers that you're allowed to have in any of the distribution centres during COVID is 6. That's the absolute maximum. If you can manage on fewer, then do so. You can multitask with some of the tasks. But again, all the time, remember social distancing, washing your hands, and not facing one another in any length of time, and keeping yourself safe. The other thing to remember is that at this moment, no food bank guests are allowed into the building. That's for the foreseeable future. As you know, COVID is beginning to increase again, so we have to be really strict on that. Because of that, it's key that you get your parcels ready, you're prepared before the guests arrive. If you can manage to do that, keep it rolling, you can actually manage to keep a guest waiting less than 5 minutes. And that is key, because it's going to get cold, it's going to get wet, it's going to get dark. It's going to be miserable in the winter, so the quicker, the slicker we can keep things going, but safely, the better for those guests. It's really important that we keep this going. We will review this decision as the evidence and guidance dictate, but at this moment, unfortunately, it is no guests in the centre. As a final point, we need to look at preparation for when the guests are able to enter the building. It's not yet. We can't let the guests into the building yet, as I've explained previously. But it's important to be prepared for when we can. So prepare your signage as the risk assessment indicates. Work through the section so that when it comes time for opening to guests, you will be prepared. It won't be a sudden mad rush. But remember, even when we do open again, while COVID is still in the country, we will not be able to give drinks to guests. They will not be able to use the toilet. So just keep that in mind. Build towards that time. We do believe in God, and we do believe that He can change things, that He can make things right. So hopefully that will happen. But at this moment, please, please, please keep safe.